Well, our second speaker this evening, Kim McConville, will use Illuminate, a community-driven multimedia exhibit by Yarrabah artists and papermakers that is currently exhibiting at New England Regional Art Museum.
Thanks, Andrew. I also wanted to support Andrew as community arts workers, that kind of tension that we struggle with the whole time about process versus product and which one is more important at which time. And I guess our challenge, and that's what Andrew's talking about, is the challenge to create that balance between process and product. So it also makes us so we're arts administrators, but we're also puppeteers as we manage that process. I wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners too, on behalf of Andrew and I, and elders past and present of the Anawan people. And I also wanted to acknowledge my colleagues that are here that I've worked with over the years, Julie and Laszlo. So because in this space of community arts, their work is equally as important as what I'll talk about, and Jonathan and Shireen as well. Did anyone, how many of you saw the Illuminate exhibition at the gallery? Yeah, it was a sound and light installation. Hopefully by the end of what I've said, you'll understand who Beyond Empathy is. I've only got a couple of photos. I'm not going to take you through everything, but they're more just to kind of stimulate some thought, and they are really beautiful images. And I guess the first thing about Beyond Empathy is art to illuminate the path to re-engagement. So our work is with the most marginalised communities and the most disadvantaged people in community, and we use art as a way to re-engage them with themselves, with their families, and with community. And it is always through the arts. We work across art form. So we work in film, we work in very little theatre, but we work in visual art, we work in music, we work in dance, we work in spoken word, across whatever young people are interested in. And I guess we're really lucky in that we get to see the very best in people, and particularly young people. So we're often in a situation where young people are being referred to our programs through a service or through an institution or a system in the community, and often with, not unkind, but with the focus being on the things that they do wrong rather than the things that they can actually do. And we're really lucky because the moment you offer an arts process towards a young person, often working beside a professional artist, they absolutely light up and they move forward. And I have to say, in 26 years of doing this work in marginalised communities with really disadvantaged families, I've never seen a child or a young person not step up. They always have in 26 years. And to add to that in 26 years of working in these communities where people often fear for their safety, I've never had a thing stolen, I've never been hurt, I've never felt at risk, and I've never had anyone around me harmed. In fact, one Christmas in Moree, I went away on summer holidays, and I had a couple of the kids ring me and say, "Hey Aunt, you left your front door open, do you want us to close it?" So just recently we did a show at the Sydney Theatre Company as part of a celebration event, and we took 17 children and young people from Moree to perform in that event, and we took 5 young people from the suspension school, the Barwon Learning Centre in Moree, and these are kids that are ranged between the age of 5 and 9, and they're on 100-day suspensions for their behaviour. I didn't actually think that was legal, but anyway, they are, and we were advised by everybody not to take those kids. And in fact, the day before we left, which often happens when the pressure comes on, those kids really caused some ruckus in the community. And we were told by everybody, even the principal of the suspension school who really believed in them, that we weren't allowed to take them. So I went in the next morning and I had to beg for these kids to be able to come, just because imagining the disappointment and the sense of failure they would have experienced had they not been allowed to go. These are kids that can't go on any excursion, they can't even go to the main school. And at the end, I had to make a promise that they would be my responsibility for the 4 days, not the schools, not the communities, not anybody. If I was prepared to take responsibility for them, I could take them, and I did. And they were absolutely outstanding. They did a fantastic performance. I'm not saying it wasn't hard work with them at times. They did an amazing performance. They got a standing ovation. But the light that came on in their parents' eyes when they were returned 4 days later, having not been sent home early, having been successful, was worth every sleep-deprived moment we experienced as we, looked after these young people around the clock. So I would say, from Beyond Empathy's point of view, build it and they will come. Light it, they will come, and they will always, always step up. We use art to illuminate the pathway from darkness to light. Our work is really, really, really about building skills. It's about increasing options and opportunities for behavioural change. If a young person knows that they can do more, then they know that they can be more. Carmel Vale, who's a local girl, and Michael Leslie, one of our professional dancers. Carmel went to NAISDA a number of years ago, and of course any young Aboriginal person that goes to NAISDA has an aspiration to be a dancer with Bangarra. And there just aren't those kind of pathways for young emerging dancers coming out of an institution actually like that. So what we've done through the arts to bring her from darkness to light, having done that training and never had an opportunity to use her creativity or her skills in dance to move herself or her community forward, we've actually teamed her with a team of professional dancers to train her up so that she too can go out into community and use her skills to move other young people forward. But a lot of the work that we do with young people like Carmel, or indeed the 100 kids, the 85 kids that made a film with us down in the Illawarra, is we do a lot of that kind of intrinsic humankind work that gets forgotten, that people actually don't really want to fund. And we often talk about what we do is we use the arts to take people from -10 to 0, so that at least then they're on an equal footing to be able to move forward with the rest of their community. Rites of Passage, the film that we made, obviously Light, the film that we made with young people in the Illawarra, received absolutely no film funding because we don't have a script. We can never start with a script because we never know where it's going to go. So we received no film funding, no philanthropic funding, and it was a self-funded project by Beyond Empathy. It actually has been seen, it took 4 years to make. We didn't know what it was going to be called. Often we didn't know where it was going. The whole process had to be open because if a person failed to turn up, the shoot had to go ahead, often creating a new direction for the shoot. So obviously there was huge skill in the editing and the process at the end. The Rites of Passage now has been screened in 13 countries around the world. It won the jury's special award in Warsaw. It's been seen by 51,000 people. It's been downloaded any number of times from Vimeo on demand and things like that. The young people have presented in 26 cities around Australia, presented their own film and talked about their own film. And it's just been bought by ABC, so that's kind of like the icing on the cake for those young people to actually see that their efforts are being rewarded and regarded in that way. I was driving home from Moree last week with a young woman who's a vocalist, and she said to me, she was talking about how her life had changed being involved in the Beyond Empathy, or the processes that the Beyond Empathy employs. And she said that she just pissed her man off because she just got sick of him going nowhere and doing nothing. And she decided that she was strong enough in herself to be actually say, I'm going somewhere and I'm doing something, so I'm just going to get on and do it by myself. And she said to me, but I don't go out anymore. And she said, I don't have sex with anybody. And I went, yeah, is that a problem? And she said, well, I don't really want to, but aren't I kind of expected to? And I said, no, babe, not at all. Like, she said, but aren't I wrong? I said, no, that's empowered. You know, when you have the opportunity to make those choices for yourself and believe in those choices. And I kind of, after we sort of finished the conversation, she kind of was affirmed that they were good choices, and the fact that she wasn't going out or shagging people at will or accepting shags at will, that she was actually in a much stronger place. I kind of knew that our work was done. You know, that's what the art is able to create. We use art for beauty, but also to illuminate the richness of our cultural heritage. And I guess it demonstrates the generosity of the Aboriginal communities that we work with in sharing their story. This is the house that's been up at Nerum for some time. It's from a work that's called Illuminate, and it was made with the Boggabilla community. And it actually comes from the idea when we worked with Jonathan Jones, who's a professional artist, and when we went into community, we always look for what's sticky in community. And as Andrew pointed out, in a community like Boggabilla, burning houses are sticky. So we actually thought that what we would do is clad a frame of a house in paper. And then the community was really emphatic that they wanted to be able to tell their story their way. So the idea of a house became central to the work because it was symbolic of the, I guess, the destruction in that community, but equally it was symbolic of the community's opportunity to tell their story their way from the inside of their hearts and the inside of their houses. And what the arts has the power to do is create common ground and a franca lingua. So conversations that are often difficult to have are made easy through the production of a beautiful artistic product. It kind of gives invitation to have a new conversation with the community, but it's also palatable for us because you're looking at a work of beauty, and it enables a space to have a conversation that we mightn't have been so comfortable in having before. But most of all, it creates common ground because we can both relate. We do a project all across Australia called Mubbly, which is we cast young Aboriginal mums' bellies as a way of connecting them to the local health service. But it's a trick. The art's a trick because all we're doing is we're taking away the sick person and well person power over people. We're creating common ground between two people through the process of creating this belly cast and then paying this belly cast that allows for an equal conversation to be had between the health worker and the young Aboriginal mum. And I think over the last couple of years we haven't had any babies born below the desired birth weight for Aboriginal babies, which is 2,500 grams, which is way below non-Aboriginal babies. We use art as a roadmap for us and as a way forward. And as a way forward to our future relationships and what needs to happen in community in relation to our work. And the reason that I'm using this photograph is we also use art to determine the basis for the relationships that we have with community, and indeed our funders. We get a lot of philanthropic funding, and we've been having some challenges with one of our donors at the moment for not saying thanks enough, I think, is the issue at the end of the day. But we did this, these donors came out to community, and it was a really difficult time for them because it's a very, very volatile community where they came to visit. And the general manager of the company kept saying to me, so you have to tell me how you're going to look after Melissa when she comes to community. And I'm going, oh, okay. I'm not sure about that, but they kept coming back at it and back at it and back at it again. And then one day I was sitting in my office and this beautiful portrait of Lily had been delivered to my office. And for the third, fourth, fifth time, the general manager said to me, so you need to actually give me a plan as to how you're going to look after Melissa when she comes out into community. And I looked at Lily's photo and I said, it's not my job to look after Melissa. You know, she has 2 degrees, she lives in Woollahra, and she has a supportive family. It's their job to look after Melissa. Our job is to look after Lily. And it suddenly occurred to me that we have really rigorous contracts with the people who fund our work, but there's no contract between philanthropists and the work that they do with Aboriginal communities. They can pull money out like that. They can change their mind. They don't have to make long-term commitments, and that leaves massive holes in community, and communities that are already vulnerable, even more vulnerable. So now as a company, we're actually going for the Lily effect, that we actually have those kind of contracts that are reciprocal and more like partnership agreements with philanthropy in terms of how they'll work in community. So art for us illuminates the way forward. We use art to illuminate all that connects us. So art that resonates, connects, illuminates, creates the realisation, they are somehow like me. When lives blurred on the margins move on to centre stage, their present demands, how do we respond? How do we become more real? It's a quote written by one of the artists that works with us, and it made me think of Catharsis, the project that Jonathan and Shireen managed here in community. And you may have seen it. It was down underneath the red grapevine, and it was a paper shredding project where people could come in and write down whatever it was that they wanted to write down, shred it and get rid of it. And then the next step in the process up at Nerrum, in the printing room downstairs, all of that paper was made into new paper. So all of the stories of the 100 kilos of paper that was collected in the community was pulped into new paper, and then new stories were printed onto that paper, stories of hope and stories of the future. But it was an absolutely beautiful image of, people coming into that space and thinking that they were alone, and then suddenly their stories became part of 100 kilos of other people's stories in the community. So in that way, art has a really powerful application to connecting people who are feeling alone, that they're in fact not alone, that somehow they are like me. So we use art in that way as well. We use art to illuminate the power of intention. This photograph recently won the World Press Photo Competition, and it's taken by an amazing young artist called Raffaella Rosella, who is a young person we met when she was 14, and she was living in a severely dysfunctional and violent relationship with a man much older than her. And when we met Rosie, she had a broken collarbone and she'd just come out of hospital, and that's why she'd been referred to our project. And she was using a lot of drugs, and in fact she would just fall over randomly. So Rosie has been involved in our projects for a long, long time now. I think she's 26. She's just come back from Amsterdam meeting the prince and the princess as they escorted her to the function after winning the award for her project. But I think the power intention, the art for Rosie was indeed a bit like a moral compass, that it was always something that she could come back to refer herself to where she was going, and reminding herself of the power of her intention to want to keep creating change in her life and indeed get out of the situation that she was actually in. And so what we've been able to do over the years is continually provide her with opportunities alongside professional artists to continue to develop her skill to the point where she's now an award-winning, extraordinary young artist. But it was the power of art to constantly shed light back to her on her moral compass that was actually the game changer for her, that took her from that moment when we met her when she was 14 to where she is now as an accomplished artist with a beautiful partner and a 2-year-old son, and now pregnant again with her second child. She also has a master's from QUT, is it QUT? Yeah, or Griffith University in Queensland, and will continue to go on to further her study. I'm just going to finish now. I'm ready to finish. That's well on time. And we often go into TED Talks to get inspiration. And there's a really amazing woman on TED Talks that I often look at called Brené Brown. And when I was looking at, things about light this afternoon, this was the one that really struck me. And it's so true of Rosie and all the other young people that we work with. Owning your own story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love, belonging, and joy, the experiences that make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of light. And I think that kind of really is a value that underpins our use of art to illuminate change, to illuminate engagement, to illuminate possibilities, to illuminate our pathway forward. It's absolutely central to the getting out of bed in the morning. And as Andrew said, I often think about whether I'm exhausted, and sometimes I think I am, but I don't think that there's anything else I would do in the world other than doing this. I'm a bit concerned at the ageing process, because how can you be cool when you're 70? But I've met some women like that, so I'm sure the possibility is absolutely there. So thank you.
Any questions for Kim?
Oh, that's good.
Rafaela's exhibition is opening this Friday.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Julie. She has another. Absolutely. Thank you. Rosie's exhibition. You'll know it when you feel it. No. Oh, that's right. Right. You didn't take away my future. You gave me a new one. Is opening at Nerrim on Friday, and it's a study of work that she's done with young mums. So she's done a kind of in-depth study, and is really intrigued with supporting the choices that young mums make to have babies, as opposed to kind of polarising them or dehumanising them or judging them for having a baby at 15. It's a really beautiful work, and there's some sound stuff attached to it as well. This time though, there's headphones, so it doesn't matter when you go and you'll get to hear it.
Kim, you're in a position where you can see and witness and experience art changing people's lives. And it may not be the objective of art in general, but do you think that's something that can be further promoted in the community, that the life-changing impact of art generally?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know any other way. And I guess if we could mass produce a belief in that, it would be amazing. I guess the difficult thing for using the arts as a change, a game changer for humankind, is that it's really difficult to measure, and so it's really difficult to attract funding for, because you can't count it that easily. And Andrew would agree, we just spend, and Shireen and Jonathan, we spend so much time trying to quantify the work that we do. And I get really frustrated, because happiness is the joy. To experience those two things are the things that underpin anything in anybody's life. And as parents, we know it's fundamental to our parenting, and that's what we drive for all the time. But if you put in a funding application to anybody, probably except the Australia Council, and say, I want to do a project just, because I want to make people happy, you're not going to get up. So we kind of bend ourselves inside out to make more sound intelligent what we're doing, when the right to feel happiness, the right to feel joy, and the right to feel engaged in community, if that was treated with more seriousness, then we'd save a shitload of money in a whole other area. So I think we're still struggling to place value or to get recognition for the value and that the arts creates in community. But as I've got older, I don't care so much. I don't care so much because I think, you know, we're just going to keep doing it, and if people want to fund it, they'll fund it. And that's taken an enormous amount of pressure off and probably inspired some more creativity.
Kim, do you think there's validity in the mentorship relationship? So you're talking about a different kind of guidance when you have artists working with young people. And this is quite a different model from possibly an unsuccessful model of a school or an institution. And so does that in itself provide a validity to the projects? The fact that these young people are meeting maybe once in their life, and that might be enough to trigger a whole process. A person who acts in a mentor role, so as a learning.
Yeah, and it's totally fundamental to everything that we do. So we have a process of working with professional artists that then work with local artists and emerging artists and then sort of pass it on. And we know that the change that we see in all of the young people that we've worked with, and we've got kids that have gone to who had never been engaged in education, gone to university. I mean, Carmel, you know, is doing some work with Bangarra now because Bangarra does a rekindling the spirit program in community, and she's the person that's training the kids in community now. So all over the place through this process of teaching, how we remember teaching to be, young people's lives have changed. But again, in a way, it's kind of creating the currency around that, like the return on that kind of investment, so that people will see it valuable as a valid form of teaching. So one of the things that we're doing is we're working with Deakin University, and we've developed a digital badging project because I think digital badging came out of technology, the technology industry, where learning is going faster than the institutions can kind of keep up with, which is what happens in a mentoring relationship. And so we've developed a project with Deakin that to actually create digital badges for the skills that all of these amazing young people have that have never followed a formal learning process, that has come through these mentoring, to actually give validity to that style of learning, because that's what happens in parenting, you know, and it's actually
and in community.
Totally. So it is very much going back to a lot more of those traditional values, and maybe they're tribal values, you know, those kind of really, you know, the things, it's kind of like the rasa, you know, the soul of community, and that's where the best learning happens. I think when the kids made Rites of Passage, the young people, they also made 13 short films in the process, so they were translating their skills that they learnt in the process of making the feature film. I was just reading through them today because we're reporting at the moment, every single one of those films has won awards, if not 2, 3, 4 awards, and that came only through the process of mentoring. I think it speaks volumes, but I guess in a way we're just a tiny organisation. If you could somehow line up with a whole lot of organisations, not necessarily to work together but to share your impact, then you could have something on a much larger, grander scale that somebody, you know, might pay attention to.
Please join me in thanking Kim and Andrew once again. Thank you, Corinne, Jonathan and Lucas for your help, and thank you everybody for coming. I hope to see you again next time. Not too bad. Great stuff to hear. Yeah.